Greetings students, welcome to Recitals in Depth. Herein, we will cover the summits and organizations in news for July 2024 current affair topics in detail. The broader themes which are going to be covered are as follows: regional organizations, environment, ecology and biodiversity, people and culture, international peace and security. This is our index for summits and organization for the July month. We will be covering the topics and along with this the previous year questions in prelims and mains. Along with that we will be discussing some practice questions as well. Second BIMSTEC Foreign Ministers Retreat. This is our first topic and this is the second Foreign Ministers Retreat. So the first one was in Bangkok, Thailand. This is the second year and now it will be hosted by India. And it is the first major event to take place after the adoption of the BIMSTEC Charter, which we had discussed in the previous lecture. So, overall, we will see what is the importance of this, and before learning that, we will see what is this BIMSTEC as an organization, its roles and function. BIMSTEC is also known as Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. BIMSTEC is the short term which we use for it. The members are Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, Nepal and Bhutan. It was formed in 1997 and the declaration which made the BIMSTEC to come into existence was the Bangkok Declaration. So this is the initial information which you should mention when we are talking about the BIMSTEC. Before giving the background, you cannot explain the relevant events. Now we know about the body, but what are the principles on which it is based? These principles which you can see: sovereign equality, territorial integrity, political independence, non-interference in internal affairs, peaceful coexistence. These will tell you about the working of the body. This will tell you the ideology which this body is going to follow. So before analyzing any of its work, we will first see the principle. So once you understand the principles, we will see where it is focusing. It will focus on trade, security, environment, climate, security, people to people contacts, connectivity, innovation. All of these are the areas which it will focus on. And these focus areas will be dependent on the principles itself. When they are working in these areas, they will keep in mind that we will not violate any other's sovereignty. We will not take away any other country's territory. So these are the things which will always be there. Now, when you also use some data in your questions, then you get some brownie points. So the total GDP is 4.5 trillion US dollars. And the population is 1.8 billion people, which is roughly 22% of the global population. Now this is about the BIMSTEC. Now we will see what is expected in this retreat. In the retreat, there were four major discussions. First was global and regional stability. Global as in, after COVID, there have been serious events like the Russia-Ukraine war, at the same time we are seeing problems in Israel. Israel and Palestine conflict is also there. So these are the global. Regionally, Myanmar had been making news a lot. So this was discussed there. You need to note that the Bangladesh crisis was not so large as it is today in the previous month. So if while we are reading this, you will not find the Bangladesh crisis there. Now Myanmar crisis occupied a major area in the event because that was the only existing crisis at that time. Now yes, Bangladesh crisis is also there. But because of that, there is a need for a humanitarian assistance. You know of the Rohingya crisis, which has taken place in Myanmar. Also, this is coming out because India's role is very important in this, because India is the biggest economy, India is the biggest population and a major nation in this grouping. So, these Rohingyas are also taking shelter in India, and at the same time in Manipur some army personnel are also being sheltered. So, Myanmar is taking assistance in Manipur also, and Rohingyas are also taking assistance from India. So, India's stand to deal with the whole issue has been that one, that India is very cautious. Cautious means careful, because armed organizations have taken up control and they are controlling the trade routes. Now, if trade routes are under their control, we cannot launch a direct war, because our ships will also be captured. People from our country, our trade will also be hampered. So, India is taking a very cautious approach, but at the same time, it is working to curb illegal activities. Illegal activities like smuggling, trade of illegal weapons, all of these things India is trying to curb, and also it will not support terrorism of any kind. So, illegal arms, narcotics or any other organized crime, India will not support, it will work to curb. Another thing India will curb is terrorist activity. So, India will support the principles of BIMSTEC, which will protect the territorial integrity of the nations and their sovereignty, and it will not allow any nation's land to be used for terror operations. This is the key highlight of this. What are the significance of this for India? Significance of the BIMSTEC and how we will overcome the challenges involved. Now, significance for India is that it is at a crossroad, Act East and neighborhood first. The countries which have been mentioned, they are in the intersection of India's foreign policy mainstay, which is Act East and neighborhood first policy of our country. So, this is the first point. Apart from this, India has highlighted the Sagar approach, security and growth for all in the region. Sagar approach for oceanic led growth and connectivity for all the countries in the region, and India is also going to be the net security provider. Also, if you see that this area before the Bangladesh crisis as well was somewhat stable, because Europe, if you see, that is a declining economy. USA is also now stagnant, it is not showing so much growth. Middle East also is engulfed in wars. So, about all of those areas, if you look at the globe, it was technically more stable. So, with the Southeast Asian countries, India could develop more connectivity and trade. And most importantly, that this is a regional grouping in our area where we can overlook Pakistan. So, Pakistan will not be there, so it is an alternative to SAARC. Now, what are the challenges which we see that the BIMSTEC is not as much operational as it should have been? First biggest challenge for BIMSTEC is that the intra-party investment, party investment is low. What does this mean? For example, the investment which has come from USA to India will be much higher than what it has come from Thailand to India, Sri Lanka to India. So the intra-party investment is much low, and the Chinese disturbance or Chinese influence in this region is also very much. The smaller countries are preferring China because China in some situation is not a direct neighbor of these countries and it has a bigger wallet, it can supply more funds. So China is influencing their relations a lot. Third thing is, which has come into the picture now, is there are unstable governments. There is a lot of instability in the region. Fourth is that the members are more or less inactive. And this is also due to the fact that there are many pending agreements. So this is our whole situation. That how we will conclude this is now that India occupies a major position in this. So India should go ahead, fulfill the aims of its foreign policy and ensure that it acts as a stability providing country to this region. Also, it should work for providing more investment in these countries. There should also be work done to improve the connectivity between these regions. So these are your takeaways from this topic. An important takeaway from the previous discussion is that this question in 2016, though not directly linked with this topic, but you will see that sometimes there are communities which are coming in the news. So based on that, they will tell you to match the country and the community. So I think this is a easier question, but I would like to ask you to mention in the comment section, where are these Kurds found? So the answer is C, but also mention in the comment section where the Kurds are found. CITES eases export of agar wood from India. CITES is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. So if a species is endangered, it requires protection. So there are certain rules, regulations and conventions which you need to follow while trading in them. Now agar wood is that type of a species. Now it is extremely expensive. Later on in the lecture we will note that if you have 1 kg of this wood or the processed form of it, you may not require to work for 2 to 3 years. This is the expenses it can cover. So there is a demand that it should be traded. There is no policy related to it. So it has created a huge issue of smuggling related with it. So this was in the news and we will understand both of these things. One is the CITES and the other is agar wood. Both of these will be studied in detail and what is the outcome of this. So CITES is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. So the objective is to protect them. Objective is that such species which are already on the curb of extinction, and if you are trading them, what will happen that they will not be sustainable. So protecting species from threat posed by international trade is the objective of this. It was drafted after the IUCN resolution was passed and the convention is known as the Washington Convention. It is a probable question for your prelims. Now there are 184 members and the treaty is legally binding. What are the rules this convention will follow or the principles? That it should be sustainable and regulated trade in wild species, in wildlife. Wildlife will include both plants and animals. If I say wildlife, it will include both plants and animals, flora and fauna. It is headquartered in Geneva and based on these convention, or the sites, there can be grouping of these species, both plant and animal, in three categories. One is the appendix 1, that it is threatened with extinction. Extinction means that it will soon not be seen. Later, the appendix 2 with a lesser degree of protection is that it must be controlled, though it will not be extinct, but still there is a chance it will be after some years if it is unsustainable. The third appendix is when at least one country feels that there is a chance of extinction in our area, so please stop curbing it. So here the curbs will be least and the degree of protection will increase from lower to upper. Okay. Now we have seen what is the sites. Before we proceed, we should also know what are the qualities of agarwood, not only for understanding this topic, but it is also important for you in the prelims and mains. Now we have the agarwood. It is also known as the Equilaria melecanis. Now the uses it, many of you must know that it is used to make oud. Oud is a very expensive essential oil, aromatic oil and perfumes. It is the use. Now how is it made? It is due to a fungal infection which is Phyllophora parasitica. Phyllophora parasitica. This insect or this fungus, when it is infecting the tree, then there is a resin formed. This resin produces aromatic oils. It will be containing the compounds like sequesteperines, chromones and phenylethyl chromones. These will give the texture and these are giving the qualities. So conservation status is that it is critically endangered and it is essential to protect it. So India requested and it was put in appendix 2 in the 1995. In the sites it is in appendix 2, so it is going to be highly regulated. Now when a species is put in appendix 2, it will be highly regulated and there will be a quota. Quota means after this, beyond this much quantity you cannot sell this. So there is a quota which is given by the sites that this much kg you can sell, beyond this you cannot. Now this quota is pending from a long time. This has not been declared by the sites. This is causing a lot of issue. So as I told you that to understand the whole issue, we need to know what is agarwood, what is sites. So both of these are understood now. This is a highly expensive wood, agarwood. It is used for making oud. There are brands associated with oud. Oud Arabia, in Middle Eastern countries, it is very much in demand and it is very expensive. So there is a quota for its export. Now this quota is not been significantly revealed by the sites. This led to illegal trade. Now if you are not giving the quota, it does not mean that India does not have agarwood. Those who have planted it, they will sell it. So this issue was created. For your prelims point of view, we should also know what are the climatic requirements for growing agarwood. So the soil thickness should be above 50 centimeter. Once you have achieved this type of thickness, you can grow it in either in red, yellow, podozoic or sandy soils. Any type of soil is preferable, but the thickness should not be less than 50 centimeter. It requires a good rainfall of 2000 to 4000 millimeter and the range of temperature should be 20 to 33. It will be found in hilly areas above 750 meters. So if you see that these are describing to you the areas of the northeastern hill areas, Assam, Manipur, Nagaland and Tripura. Along with this, it is also found in Bangladesh, Myanmar and Thailand. So these are the qualities you need to know about agarwood. Beyond this, we will see what happened inside the meeting. Whenever you will hear of this topic or listen of this topic, there will be a review of significant trade. Now significant trade means if there is a endangered species or critically endangered listed in any of the three appendices, then there will be a review if there is significant trade going on in it. Now if a body or if a species put into review of significant trade, you will have to allow the CITES team to come inside and conduct a review of how much trade has been done, whether it is sustainable or not. You will have to notice that in this regard, India successfully prevented means it did not allow the review of the trade going on in agarwood. It instead stated that it is working fine, but how? There was a report by the Biological Survey of India. This report stated that there is a non-detrimental function going out because of this. It is not detrimental to the population of agarwood trees. So please allow to function it. So this is the overall story, that India did not allow the review because the Biological Survey of India gave this report that the trade is not detrimental to the existing population. So this is the NDF which you will see in the news, and the RST which is given in the news again and again. These are very critical terms to understand the outcome. Now what was the outcome? A quota was set. There was a quota fixed. Secondly, it was also decided that wild population, if agarwood is growing in the wild, that cannot be traded, but if it is being grown in plantations, it should be allowed. So basically, if a farmer is planting it, it should be allowed to be sold. So the overall significance or the analysis which we can see is that it will increase benefits for farmers, and secondly, it will curb the illegal trade or smuggling, because earlier I told you there was no quota fixed. Now the quota has been mentioned, and after proper research from BSI, Biological Survey of India, and the CITES team, then this quota has been released. So now whatever farming will be there will be based on sustainable principles. Rajasthan's tribal communities recognized for tackling global challenges at UN event. Now there was this high level political forum on sustainable development, which was by UN ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council. They have recognized the work done by the tribes in Rajasthan for tackling the global challenges which we see from day to day. To understand this whole topic better, we will first see what is the ECOSOC and the high level political forum, and what were these practices which were being followed by these tribals. Firstly, we will see the ECOSOC, United Nations Economic and Social Council. The main idea behind this body is to give the direction to economic, social, humanitarian and cultural activities of the UN. So the strategy and the planning of these activities will be done by the ECOSOC. It was one of the 6 principal organs of the UN when the UN was established. So in the UN Charter there were 6 bodies, and the ECOSOC was also mentioned there. So the members are 54 states which are elected after every 3 years for 3 years by the United Nations General Assembly. So this is about the ECOSOC. Hence it is going to give direction to the social, economic, cultural, humanitarian works of the United Nations. In what direction, in what values basis will the UN work in these areas. So now what is the high level political forum on SDG? So this SDG forum or the high level political forum will see the review for the working of the SDGs or the sustainable developmental goals, which are valid up to 2030, or the target date is 2030. So it will review how the member states are working. And the theme, this can be directly asked. The theme is reinforcing the 2030 agenda and eradicating poverty in times of multiple crises. The effective delivery of sustainable, resilient and innovative solutions. This is your theme for this year. Now based on this, we will see what are the practices. What are the significant contributions, or what are the things they did like and they were highlighted. First is that their practices are rooted in respect for nature. They noted that the tribes of Rajasthan are not looking at nature like the West does. The West is looking at nature as a commodity or for capitalistic interest, whereas the people of Rajasthan are worshipping trees. So in this situation, they are saying that there is a lot of respect for nature which they could observe. Secondly, they are preserving the locally evolved seeds. Now what does this mean? When the whole world is going for high yielding variety of seeds, they are preserving the locally genetically evolved seeds which have carried on the generations and generations of genes in their seeds. So this local seeds will be knowing, or they will be evolved through the local climatic conditions, and they will be more resilient. So this is also which has been highlighted. This is something which is their daily life practice. The most important thing highlighted was the idea of Swaraj. Swaraj, they have translated to it as sovereignty, or we can say self-rule. What are they saying that Swaraj is needed in? Swaraj is needed for seeds. They are saying seeds, which we have told you that they are preserving their culture, their genetically modified, locally evolved genetics seeds, their food and nutrition, and also in terms of their soil. So all of these things, they are applying the principle of Swaraj. That is why we could see that when the COVID came, the tribal communities of Rajasthan, their life did not hamper a lot. Their life was more or less normal. So this is the overall things which they have noted. So what are the best practices? These are the principles on which they were based. Best practices are, first is production of local seed. They have been able to resist the temptation for going of the high yielding varieties and developing these seeds on their own. Also, they are conserving water. At source. They are not only conserving water at their homes, but also from the source, from the river which it is coming, from the tank which it is coming, community tank, or at the pond from where it is coming. So this is another best practice which was noticed by the council. Now, the another thing which we could see was mixed cropping. They adopted the practice of mixed cropping to prevent soil erosion. Apart from this, they were also utilizing the crops which are locally sourced. So locally sourced crops. So all of these ideas have also been suggested that they be used to protect our culture for the future. Now in the conclusion, I would state that these activities not only contribute to take care of the local aspirations, but also give you self-sufficiency. Along with this, we can align them with the sustainable development goals such as eradicating poverty, hunger and disease. Mohiddams inscribed in the UNESCO's World Heritage List as India's 43rd entry. Now this is done by the UNESCO, and we will understand what this body is. And these Moidams are the third entry from Assam after Kaziranga and Manas. Both are of natural category. This is a cultural category site which we will see when we understand UNESCO. So, we will first do that. So, UNESCO is the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. It is a specialized agency of the UN to build peace through international cooperation in education, science and culture. So, I was telling you about the natural and the cultural. So, it is established after the World War II and the successor of International Committee on Intellectual Cooperation of the League of Nations. After the World War I, the League of Nations was formed, and when it was dismantled, we have the United Nations. United Nations under the UNESCO does the same work as the Committee on Intellectual Cooperation was doing. So, to understand what type of work it will do, we will note down the treaties. Please note these treaties down separately, because these are extremely important and they can ask you in a statement type question how many of them are correct. So, Convention on Promotion of Diversity of Culture Expressions, then Intangible Cultural Heritage, Declaration on Cultural Diversity. You will also have the Underwater Cultural Heritage, Protection of World Cultural and Natural Heritage. This is very important. And the means of prohibiting and preventing illicit traffic of cultural property. It is headquartered in Paris. So, this is about the UNESCO. Now, the heritage sites is based on this treaty, which we will see. Now, World Heritage Site is a work of UNESCO. These sites have outstanding universal value either in the cultural aspect, and they are in the Convention for Protection of World Cultural and Natural Heritage. So, the type of sites, World Heritage Sites, which we can see are going to be either of cultural, means they are having outstanding universal value in culture. And how will we know that? That either these are historical buildings, towns or archaeological sites which will be showcasing your culture. Secondly, it will be a natural site, that it is showcasing ecological and evolutionary process. Like I told you, Manas and Kaziranga, they are in the natural heritage site category. Now, Moidams are in the cultural heritage site. And what are mixed? Mixed can be that both of them are there, that it will also have historical buildings and life has also evolved there in a particular manner, which makes it of outstanding universal value. Which body will decide whether they are having outstanding value or not? This is the World Heritage Committee. It will implement the World Heritage Convention. So, this is your information for the World Heritage Sites. Now, we will understand what are the features which we were talking about. Now, as you can see this hemispherical feature, this is your Moidam. There is also a passage, so we will discuss this. Now, this feature which you could see, Moidam, so there is a chamber in it, and above it is the hemispherical mound. As you can see, it was hemisphere. Now, there is at times also a small railing there is an octagonal low railing. Now, they are found in Assam. These were built by the Ahom kings, and these are the burial sites of Ahom kings. So, as you could see in your ancient India, that there was a megalithic structure in the south, there was megalithic burial. So in a similar fashion we see that the Ahoms are doing mound burials. So this is the Moidam, and this place where these are most found is Cheradorai. Now so these are found at the foothills of the hills in Assam. So these are located in the Patkai range. You will find them in the Patkai range foothills, and the district is Chiraido, because the Moidams were first built in this district. Now, as the size of this increases, this will show more respect for the leader. Now, Chiraidio is the place where most of these Moidams are found, because the first time the king was buried was in this district. So you will find these mounds in different districts of Assam also, but the most important will be in Chiraidio, because they will provide you with the mounds of the kings. And what are the belongings they are put in? They are believing in afterlife. So they are also putting in the horses, the servants, the wives, and all the ornaments which the king will need in their afterlife. So they will bury their king there along with these living people also. Now Ahom kings, they are having one of the longest reigns in India. They came in 1228 AD, and they established themselves in the Brahmaputra valley. And their kingdom can be seen till the Treaty of Yandabu. Which you will see with the British. This is in 1826. So they are existing for the almost 600 years. You will study this in the modern India, or you must have studied this in the British rule also. So when they said we want to go into Burma, we want to attack and annex it, we will not say anything to you. So all of that story you must have read in modern India. So this is their long reign. So even in the Mughal times, they were undefeated. The Ahom kingdom was undefeated, and the king responsible for that was Lachit Borphukan. He fought with the Mughals in the battle of Saraighat. In the battle of Saraighat, Lachit Borphukan was the leader, and the Hindu kingdom of Ahom defeated the Mughal armies with the help of strong navy and guerrilla warfare. So these are two striking features, and there is a Lachit Borphukan medal also given to the training in army. So these are your information about the Ahoms. These are your key informations. Along with the previous aspect, we can also cover this topic, which is Gaza's Tel Amer is included in the World's Heritage Site list. This is also under UNESCO. So this is a continuation of the previous topic, but it is listed as another topic. So this place, Tel Amer, is a Christian monastery. First in that region, which paved the way. So this is created by Hilarion the Great. And putting it as a World Heritage Site also put pressure on Israel. This is the main reason that they will put pressure on Israel. This is located in Gaza. So that now there will be a responsibility on the international community and Israel as well to protect this site. So this is it for this news, and this is a continuation of your previous aspect. Quad ministerial meeting. Now, India has hosted the foreign ministers of the Quad countries, which are India, Japan, Australia, and USA. Based on this meeting, there has been a joint statement. So, first we need to understand what is the role of the Quad, and then we will go on to the key highlights of this meeting. Now, the Quad is a quadrilateral security dialogue, and its short form is Quad. Quadrilateral basically means four-sided security dialogue. So, what is it about? It is about an informal strategic forum. Forum is a place where you get discussions, which will have four countries: India, USA, Australia, and Japan. What is the objective or purpose of having these discussions? That we should have a free, open, prosperous, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific means the area which is covering the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. These are talking about the oceans and Indian Pacific. So, this is the oceans, Indo-Pacific area, and the countries which are surrounding. If you will see the map, all of these countries, USA, Japan, Australia, and India, will be covering these. These are the four major countries around this area. Now, the evolution, it was proposed by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Now, this is in the current format, that it will discuss about the strategic. Earlier, this Quad was also existing there as an informal mechanism when the Indian Ocean tsunami came. So, that time it was for disaster management. Now, it is taking about geostrategic implications in the Indian Ocean region and the Pacific region. So, it is known as the Indo-Pacific now. So, combinedly, this was first proposed by Shinzo Abe. Now, this Quad became a formal group after the Australia's initial withdrawal in 2017. Now, from 2007, it was not able to become a formal group because Australia was saying we cannot do it. There is a lot of Chinese investment in Australia, and Chinese is also being used on signboards in Australia. That is the amount of ingression China has made into Australia. So, they were pressurizing Australia not to join this. So, these are four democracies which are trying to make sure that the whole area of the Indo-Pacific is free, open, prosperous, and inclusive. So, this is the Quad for you. We will now see what happened in that event. As I told you that there was a joint statement. So, the joint statement mentioned about three things. Three very important things I am telling, rest there are some minor issues, but the three major things which have happened and are going to be path changing for the geostrategic implementations, these will be the things. The joint statement first talked about Russia, Ukraine crisis. Secondly, it also talked about the South China Sea and also the East China Sea, basically China in particular, that why, and also why China is blocking terrorists, why China is blocking people from being designated terrorist. At UN, why is China repeatedly using its veto that Masood Azhar be declared a terrorist? So, all of these things are stated. Now, it is also suggesting that the dialogue be expanded towards the Indian Ocean region. So, these are the key highlights of this. And what is the significance of this meeting? So, the first part we will understand the significance of this meeting, and second is the significance of Quad for India, which we have to understand overall. So, the significance of this meeting is that for the first time India has spoken about the Russia-Ukraine war and stated that Russia should respect the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine. So, this is the first time secondly, this is also a major breakthrough because first time the Quad has given a joint statement regarding Russia and China. So this is India's first and Quad's first as well. Now you would be wondering that why is it so important, what is the significance? This is very significant because till now India has never stated in its national statements that Russia should do this or Russia should do that. It has refrained from taking participation. It has remained non-aligned, and this time, for the first time in the Quad, India has given such a statement. So this is the path-breaking development which has taken with respect to geopolitics. So now it may seem, or this may be a beginning where USA and India are moving towards each other and Russia or China are converging more and more. So this people or experts can suggest that Indian foreign policy is tilting towards the West and leaving Russia. So this is one big significance of this. Now significance of the Quad for India. Now as you know, the biggest factor or the geopolitical concern for India is China and its increasing inroads in the Indian Ocean region. So India can also work on its Act East policy. If we focus on this area, and third, we can also get defense technology for maritime security. So this is the significance of Quad for India, but at the same time the concluding remarks would be that India should look at its strategic interest and not get embroiled in the great power rivalry. Basically, it should not involve itself in the America-China conflict or the America-Russia conflict. It should have its own independent policy and uphold its strategic autonomy through the NAM. So this is one way you can conclude. Now a practice question based on this is, Quad is an undeniable entity in the cobweb of international politics. Discuss its impact on the foreign policy of India. So as we have studied right now that the foreign policy of India might change or it may appear to be changing, though essentially it may be the same. But if the foreign policy has remained same, then why India is giving such a stance which it has never taken earlier? So undeniable entity means that Quad is having an existence. First you will explain this. Then you will say cobweb of international politics means you will show the complex interdependence. Complex interdependence means that we might be having a clash with China on the border, but we still do trade. But we will also cooperate with China when it comes to climate change because we are both in that category where we need help. So we will both talk of common but differentiated responsibilities. So there will be some areas where you will cooperate, some areas where there will be conflict. So you will prove this with the cobweb word is given for this reason. And then you will say the impact on the foreign policy. You can mention some key points in the comment section. 24th meeting of the SCO, Council of Heads of States. So it is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Their heads of state have met each other and it is the 24th such meeting and it is being done in Astana. So this is the overall background and we will understand what are the implications for India and the Central Asian region in particular. So we will first see what is the SCO. So the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it is headquartered in Beijing, China. So it was initially the Shanghai 5. It was to reduce the border troops. After the Soviet Union had disintegrated, there was Russia and few other countries, the bordering countries, and it was seen that we should now cooperate and not reduce the conflict which is there, reduce the border troops and terrorist activities after the Soviet era. So it is basically a grouping for the regional peace and security in the Central Asian region, which was erstwhile occupied by the Soviet Union or the USSR. Now the members are, there are 10. In this session Belarus has joined in this summit. These are India, Iran, Kazakhstan, China, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. So the official language are Chinese and Russian. India joined in the Astana summit in 2017. It is the supreme decision making body is the Heads of State Council. Head of State Council means when the prime ministers or the head of the government will be presenting in the session, on then they will make the decisions. If there is a foreign ministers meeting, then the decision will not be made, but this is the key decision making body. And there are two permanent bodies also associated with the SCO. One is the SCO Secretariat, that is the official building where all the documents and secretaries are there. Also the Executive Committee on Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure, this is known as the RATS. This is located in Tashkent. The SCO Secretariat is in Beijing. Now we will understand what actually happened. So as I have told you that first we will understand that what are the highlights of the meeting, then what is the significance of this meeting overall. After that we will see what is the significance of SCO for India. Now first thing which happened was that Belarus had joined as a fresh member. Secondly, another thing which has happened is Astana Declaration. This was adopted, which had 25 sectors of cooperation. So there were basically 25 areas where the countries suggested that we will cooperate. So it is a huge declaration. May it be trade, security, terrorism, cyber security, resources, uranium, all the things were covered. You name it and it was there. So this organization is spreading rapidly. It is trying to have a multi-dimensional character. So this is what has come out of the Astana Declaration. Thirdly, India-China talks were also there on the sidelines, and a beautiful outcome of that was Make in India was highlighted, and it was said that India can be a future engine of growth for the world. Now this will be exactly your significance. One significance is that the body is expanding. When a person is expanding or a body is expanding, it means that it is gaining interest, or people are seeing you with interest, they want to be associated with you. It means you are doing good. For example, the Brexit or the British exit from European Union means that they are not believing in the future of EU. But now more and more countries are coming to join this SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It means that they believe in the future. Astana Declaration, it is making this body multidimensional. More and more areas of cooperation are being seen by the countries, and the area is being seen as more cooperative. So there will be more growth in this area. India and China have come up, Make in India is also there. So India's ability to become a Vishwaguru is being expressed. Now what is the significance of SCO for India? Firstly, that it is a grouping of three major countries. Russia is also there, China is also there, and India is also there. So these two countries are very major, and India will interact with them for a greater development of the regional apparatus. How we will proceed in the governance of this regional area. Second is that this body is very influential in curbing terrorism. So the RATS organization, or Curb Terror, is also possible, and China and Pakistan both are available in this forum. So if we want to step up an issue, we can take it through this. Another significance is the rich resources in the Central Asia. Usually what used to happen was either in the SAARC or any other body, and through geography also, our location is such that if we want to go to Central Asia, we will have to take either China or Pakistan's approval. There is no natural connectivity with them. Only thing is flights, but flights are more expensive, so there is less contact. But through this SCO, the people to people contacts can increase, trade can increase, and also the rich resources in terms of uranium will be available to us. So this is the overall significance of the SCO. Now we will see some questions related to it. Now this is a question, and I have given the answer because it is not directly related to SCO, but you can see that it is an option. So it is an important body for the UPSC, and this is how the UPSC will try to confuse you. The term regional comprehensive economic partnership often appears in the news in the context of a group. So if RATS was there, the answer could be C, but answer is B. Now you have to understand that you have to learn the terms which are associated with these groupings. So this is to teach you this. This is our major takeaway. And for mains, critically examine the aims and objectives of SCO. We have done this in the table which I was teaching you. What is the importance it holds for India? So this is asked in 2021. Don't feel that it is just a trivial information which is coming out. SCO is very important, and read it properly. So if they have asked for SCO, they can also ask RATS in the upcoming examinations. So please keep this in your focus. India to host second Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Civil Aviation. So civil aviation is basically the air travel which we are considering. Now India is going to host the second meeting, and this is going to be a major breakthrough. India can take a lot, and it can also showcase its technology in terms of civil aviation. So before we go into this, we will understand the international organization associated with it. Now International Civil Aviation Organization, by the end of this lecture you will understand why this is being given so much time, and this tabular approach will help you to understand it easily. Now it was established by the Chicago Convention, very important point for prelims, or even in mains. If a question comes on Chicago Convention, you will focus on this. It is a specialized agency of the UN and headquartered in Montreal, Canada. This is also, these three lines are very important for prelims. Now they will develop international standards which are related to aviation safety or air travel, security, efficiency, environment. Their overall goal is to promote safe and orderly growth of international air transport. So it should not be a situation that two planes are going and they are crashing with each other. There is improper traffic management in the airports. So all of these things, there are proper standards. It should not be a situation that we are increasing air travel and we are burning up the ozone hole. So all of these things are going to come under this. Now the members are 193, because almost all countries have air travel. It is a necessity, and almost all countries are members. It is all open to all the states which have signed the Chicago Convention. India is a founding member and it joined it in 1944. Now what are the functions? International standard and recommended practices, they will establish this. This is the highest regulatory body at the international level. For example, banking is regulated by RBI in India. So at the same scale, you see that the civil aviation is seen by International Civil Aviation Organization. It will also conduct audits whether these standard and recommendation which we are giving out, are these being followed by the member countries. They will also give you technical assistance to build capacity, and they will also help in the data and statistics collection. So these are going to be the functions, and to fulfill these functions they carry out some key programs. For these programs, they are universal safety oversight audit programs. So they will check whether the maintenance of the aircraft is done properly or not, whether the protocols for communication between aeroplanes are being followed or not. So these type of things will be in the universal safety oversight. There is also the universal security audit. So it will ensure what are the security systems which are in place at the airports. So all in international flights we are talking about. Next generation aviation professionals is another program which will ensure that there is no shortage of aviation professionals in the countries which are operating, so that there are no delays. Next is no country left behind. If there is any country which is lagging in the standardization, then the ICAO will help it. Now we will see the impact. Now the highlights of this is that India will be hosting it. Earlier it was done in China. So now India is going to host this meeting, and the major significance of this is, so the major key takeaway is that India will be hosting. So this is the only thing. The significance is that this is Asia Pacific region accounts for almost 33.41% of the global air transport, and it is roughly a $4.5 billion industry, which is slated to be $11.5 billion by 2050. So in the next 25 years it is going to be 2.5 times of what it is. So this is the kind of significance of this. There is a lot of growth, and the significance for India will be that it can adopt the innovation and technology. So India can also be a leading country in this regard. In the fighter planes segment, HAL has come up very specifically. Earlier we were importing our aeroplanes, but now HAL is exporting the Tejas. So this is a great turnaround. So this needs to be replicated in the civil aviation also. So this is our highlight and the takeaway from this. Now we have done this in detail to understand what type of questions can come, and it will be very fruitful if you follow this. So please see this previous year question. In 2014, it was specifically asked, international civil aviation laws provide all countries with complete and exclusive sovereignty over the airspace above their territory. What do you understand by airspace? What are the implications of these laws on the space above this airspace? Discuss the challenges which this poses and suggest ways to contain the threat. So the conventions which are associated, and I am teaching you, so you need to read them very carefully, because based on this also questions are being directly asked in the examination. India to sign, ratify High Seas Treaty. So in order to understand this whole issue, we will first understand what is the high sea. Now this is India, 12 nautical miles from India will be considered as territorial waters, or it is also considered as the territory of India in terms of water and air. Beyond this 12 more nautical miles, total will be 24. It will be contiguous zone. Contiguous zone means if you are beyond this point and the police is chasing you, they can catch you. But once they are beyond this, beyond the 24 mark, they will not be able to catch you. This is known as the contiguous zone. This is 12 till 12 is the territorial water. Beyond this is the contiguous. Contiguous means if you have done a fraud in India and you are running to another country, but if you are caught within the 24 nautical miles, you will be caught. So this is contiguous. So if you want to go away, just pass this much area. So you will not be able to be caught, because beyond this is the international water. But up to 200 is the exclusive economic zone. So if any mineral is found up to 200 miles, nautical miles, it will be considered as India's property. So beyond this is the high sea. So any point beyond 200 nautical miles is the high sea. So any area 200 nautical miles from your country is considered as high sea, and this does not belong to any one country. So now we are in a position to understand this treaty. So the first treaty which we have is UNCLOS, or United Nations Convention for the Law of Sea, or what will happen in the seas. So which I told you that 12 nautical miles is territorial, 24 is contiguous, beyond that it is the exclusive economic zone up to 200 nautical miles. So I did not make it up, it was this convention which stated that this is the rule. I do not have the authority to tell you till where people can be caught or not. We see the conventions which have been signed by different countries. You must have heard of the Italian marine case. They shot fishermen in India and they were in our contiguous zone, so they were caught. So there was a case. Now what is this treaty about? It will define the rights and duties of the country which are having sea near them, and it will lay down the general principles of acceptable conduct in the oceans. So how will a country conduct itself in the ocean? So otherwise what will happen if a country is taking its trade? So you will say that I found this resource in the ocean, so it is mine, I have the exclusive right. No, trade is different. If natural resources are being found in water, they will belong to you. It does not mean that someone is going, so you are behaving like a pirate. So there has to be acceptable conduct in the ocean. What are the high seas? As I told you, water beyond 200 nautical miles from the coast of a country. So it is not included in the exclusive economic zone, territorial sea, or the internal water of a state. So contiguous zone, territorial water, or exclusive economic zone. Beyond that, whatever you have is the high sea, as I told you. And what is the high seas treaty which India is going to sign? It is also known as the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement. This is very important. Either they can ask you the high seas treaty or the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction agreement. So both of them are extremely important. And why has this issue come up? What used to happen, that country can go and deposit their garbage in the high sea. They can say it is not our. Countries can go and establish their polluting industries or radio element they can throw there. Radioactive waste they can throw there. So there will be a proper law governing these things now. India will accept this. Demarcation of marine protected areas. As I told you earlier also, that the high seas are not belonging to any particular nation. They are belonging to all. Now if there is a marine protected area which is there in the national body, and if it is going beyond a certain point, it will be demarcated first properly and other countries will recognize it. India will have to take steps to take care of it. Sustainable use of marine resources, genetic resources, and equal distribution of benefits arising out of it. Now if a country like USA, which is advanced, it is going USA, it is going in the high sea. which is near the coast of India. For example, this is India. This is the place 210 nautical miles from India. So, for example, USA is going into the high sea. This place is 210 nautical miles from India. So now USA says that I have taken this fish, done research on it, and I will not give India anything. But India will say that all the resources this fish was taking was from this area. So USA cannot claim it. So these are also issues of conflict. So there should be sustainable use of marine genetic resources. If you are doing any research and there is a lesser developed country, or if it is an African nation, small island, so then they should be also given equitable distribution. There should be environmental impact assessment before any project is done. Also, capacity building and technology transfer should be done to low income countries, and there will be a creation of a new body to manage this, all of these areas. So why is this coming into force? We will understand this now. Now, what is the rationale behind this treaty? Firstly, that high seas, they will occupy 64% of the sea or ocean areas, then which is about 22% of the marine species. And as it was discussed that these species do not belong to a particular nation, so all of them will say it is not our responsibility. Even to conserve these species, you will require money, and no country is willing to pay money to protect the climate until and unless it is having a direct impact on their country. So in areas which do not belong to anybody, there is a higher collaboration required. For example, in the ozone case, or in Antarctica, or in the high seas. So this area was majorly neglected. Also, there is a case for climate change. In the previous videos, I have also taught you that the change in climate due to disruption in trade, due to longer paths being taken by the ships. So all of these have been covered in the previous segments also. Please watch them and do this to maintain a proper continuity. So climate change is also there, environmental pollution in these is also there. Most important thing is why we need this is that we had studied UNCLOS in the previous slide. This only stated that what is the high sea, but it did not give any mechanism to protect. So now with this treaty, we will also have a mechanism to make sure that the high seas are protected. Now your high seas will be protected because high seas treaty will have a proper protocol to save the environment here. In the previous times, we could only state that this is the high sea, but no country would take responsibility. There were no duties or rights related to them. Now, what will be the benefit for India? One is that it is aligning with our Sagar approach, security and guarantee for all in the region. And with this, we will have this Sagar approach, we will see that the growth is sustainable. Also, illegal fishing will also not be there. India will also be getting benefits out of research. Genetically modified organisms, or if anything is done in the USA, we will also benefit from that. But now what are the commitments for India? Because India is going to be binded in this treaty. What are the commitments India will have to take? First is that it will have to demarcate the marine protected areas, basically wildlife sanctuaries and national parks which are there in the marine areas, it will have to show. And it specifically, if any damage is caused by India, then through international law it will be bound to pay. or if any other country also causes the damage, India will get compensation. But our responsibility will be more. There are very less chances that a third country will come and spoil our resources. Next is environmental impact assessment will become necessary. Another thing is that it will have to also realign human conduct. Human conduct means business activities, military activities and normal tourist activities. All of these will be regulated and there will be international obligations for the same. So with this we conclude today's lecture. Thank you so much.